Hello, bruvs. Oh no, don't reject me here. Come on, please. We're back with Samuel McKechnie's Popular Entertainments Through the Ages, a 1969 reprint, Benjamin Blom print. I don't know when the original was written. I think in the 50s. Could be wrong. But let me start the chat and then we'll get this going. I really hate this glare from these glossy pages. But such as never seen a complete book that was a book that was all glossy. But this is it. This is the book. Come on. Open, 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 open. Open, open. All right, my internet is telling me it doesn't want to cooperate. Just want to open the chat. Anyway, someone comes in there, I'll open the chat. There we go. Control V. This is the second part of chapter 2, obviously, as we're starting on the fourth section. I will upload a picture, put a title on this, and then we shall get on with the blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Popular entertainments through the ages. Put the picture up. I've got your picture. She's got you. Pop. This is Pop. This is Pop. 4. The production at Bartholomew Fair of The Beggar's Opera in an abridged version a few months after its record run at Lincoln's Inn Field Theater in 1728 was a noteworthy event in the annals of popular entertainments. It was important not only because of the difference between the first true English opera and the usual type of entertainment at the fair, but also on account of the fact that the Beggar's Opera owed much of its popularity to the use which Gay made of old ballad airs. He included, for example, the air of Chevy Chase, and it is said that the success of the opera on the first night of its original production was in danger until Polly Peachum sang a song to the air of a ballad which had long been one of the most popular with the common people, the Ballad of the Children in the Wood. The opera is actually supposed in the introduction to have been written by a ballad singer. I own myself of the company of beggars, he says, and I make one at their weekly festivals at St. Giles. I have a small yearly salary for my catches. He had written the piece for the celebration of the marriage of two ballad singers, James Chanter and Molly Lay, chanter being another term for ballad singer, and lay for ballad. That Gay appreciated the genius to be found among entertainers of the common people is clear not only from his use of ballad airs, but also from the remark of the player in the introduction. The Muses, contrary to all other ladies, paid no distinction to dress. The opera was produced at Bartholomew Fair by a company of comedians from the Haymarket Theatre, which for a number of years at this period, like Drury Lane and Lincoln's Inn Fields, closed during the fair. Many of the best comedians of the day found it worth their while to act there, and their regular audiences followed them to the 3 or 4 large theatrical booths which formed the playhouses of the fair. The early 18th century was therefore the golden age of the fair, and even towards the middle of the century, there were famous names associated with it. Henry Fielding, in his 20s and not yet famous as a novelist, had a booth for several years. Colley Cibber, the poet laureate and famous actor, opened a booth one year with some colleagues and acted in it. Mrs. Pritchard, the actress, who reached the top of her profession, first secured popularity in an adaptation of Malaire's Les Faux Barils de Scapin, I don't know French, which was produced in a booth partly owned by Fielding. In spite of the intrusion of famous players, writers, and pieces, the fair retained its essential character. There was on show one year two rattlesnakes, one a very large size, and rattles that you may hear him a quarter of a mile almost, and something of music that grows on the tails thereof, of divers, colors, forms, and shapes with darts that they extend out of their mouths about 2 inches long. Other items were the teeth of a dead rattlesnake to be seen and handled with the rattles, a sea snail taken on the coast of India, and a curious collection of animals and insects from all parts of the world. Some drawings made on a Bartholomew Fair fan about 1728 are reproduced. They deal with types rather than crowds, and wherever it has suited him to do so, the artist, the forerunner perhaps of some of our modern schools, has omitted a limb or reduced a figure, and in the case of the up and downs, he has even left out the fourth stall. The drawings are none the less invaluable records. Among them is a particularly interesting picture of Fawkes, the most famous conjurer of the age. He exhibited regularly in London, and so great was his popularity that he acquired by his skill a fortune of £10,000. It will be noticed that Harlequin is astride a rail shouting an invitation to walk up. He is also seen performing the same useful function in the picture of Lee in Harper's dramatic booth, where the attraction is an apparently gory production of Judith and Holofernes. Holofernes. Another picture shows a gentleman drinking ale and eating hot sausages. Sounds interesting. The hot sausages are worthy of our attention, for they were successfully challenging the supremacy of that famous delicacy, Bartholomew pig. Towards the middle of the century, the pleasure seekers forsook their old dish almost entirely, and instead of the odor of roast pig, there pervaded the fair the smell of hot beef sausages. What Charles Lamb thought of sausages may be uncertain, but no one who has read his dissertation upon roast pig will refrain from dropping a tear at the conquest of the Bartholomew luxury by spiritually unsatisfying, if hunger appeasing, hot beef sausages. The following lines from a poem by George Alexander Stevens describe the fair as it was about the middle of the 18th century. I really want to read Charles Lamb's dissertation upon roast pig. Anyway, here is George Alexander Stevens describing the fair. Here was, first of all, crowds against other crowds driving, like wind and tide meeting, each contrary striving, shrill fiddling, sharp fighting, and shouting and shrieking, fifes, trumpets, drums, bagpipes, and barrow girls squeaking. Come, my rare round and sound, here's choice of fine ware, though all was not sound sold at Bartlemy Fair. There was drolls, hornpipe dancing, and showing of postures, with frying black puddings and opening of oysters, with salt boxes solos, and gallery folks squalling, the tap house guests roaring, and mouthpieces bawling, pimps, pawnbrokers, strollers, fat landladies, sailors, bawds, bailies, jilts, jockeys, thieves, tumblers, and tailors. Here's Punch's whole play of the gunpowder plot, wild beasts all alive, and peas pudding all hot, fine sausages fried, and the black on the wire, the whole court of France, and nice pig at the fire. Here's the up and downs who will take a seat in the chair, though there's more up and down than at Bartlemy Fair. Here's Whittington's cat and the tall dromedary, the chaise without horses and Queen of Hungary. Here's the merry-go-rounds, come who rides, sir. Wine, beer, ale, and cakes, fire-eating, besides, sir, the famed learned dog that can tell all his letters, and some men as scholars are not much his betters. The class of entertainment and the type of visitor mentioned in the poem are worth noticing, for between them They were bringing the days of the fair to a close. Only a year or two before the description was penned, the mob had seized and burned the up and downs, which had collapsed without injuring anyone, and had added tables, chairs, and other property to the bonfire. In 1773, the following announcement was made concerning a lady whose portrait is reproduced. To the nobility and gentry, and to all who are admirers of the extraordinary productions of nature, there is to be seen in a commodious apartment at the corner of Cow Lane facing the sheep pens, West Smithfield, during the short time of Bartholomew Fair, Maria Teresia, the amazing Corsican fairy, who has had the honor of being shown 3 times before their majesties. She was exhibited in Cockspur Street, Haymarket, at 2 shillings and 6 pence each person, but that person of every degree may have a sight of so extraordinary a curiosity, she will be shown to the gentry at 6 pence each, and to working people, servants, and children at 3 pence during the fair. The most astonishing part of the human species was born in the island of Corsica, on the mountain of Stata Ada, in the year 1743. She is only 34 inches high, weighs but 26 pounds, and a child of 2 years has larger hands and feet. Her surprising littleness makes a strong impression at first sight on the spectator's mind. Nothing disagreeable, either in person or conversation, is to be found in her, although most of nature's productions in miniature are generally so in both. Her form affords a pleasing surprise. Her limbs are exceedingly well proportioned. Her admirable symmetry engages the attention, and upon the whole is acknowledged a perfect beauty. She is possessed of a great deal of vivacity of spirit, can speak Italian and French, and gives the inquisitive mind an agreeable entertainment. In short, she is the most extraordinary curiosity ever known or ever heard of in history, and the curious in all countries where she has been shown pronounce her to be the finest display of human nature in miniature they ever saw. She is to be seen by any number of persons from 10 in the morning till 9 at night. It's pretty interesting. I wonder if there's a book on her. A new type of entertainment was introduced. 5. A new type of entertainment was introduced towards the end of the 18th century, the circus. Astley himself, the founder of the modern circus, appeared with his troupe at the fair, and Saunders was a frequent visitor. Saunders was loved, wrote a poet dealing with the fair as it appealed to him about 1816 when he was a boy. As we have looked at the fair through the eyes of grown-ups of various periods, it is as well that there should also be remembered the spirit in which a boy went to it and the impression it made on him. All unforgotten is that sunny day. Ah, days were sunny then. When I, a truant and a happy boy, why are those synonyms bounded away? All mud and mirth and gingerbread and joy, prancing in puddles, passing through each pen, into that Babylon of booths, the fair. Weeks had I vowed, Bartholomew, to strive for it. True to that vow, but little did I care, though I, like them of old, were flayed alive for it. O joyous child, I marked the glittering show of wearied mountebanks, and envied each their recklessness of mirth. I deemed it such, for then it had not been my lot to know that harlequins have griefs and clowns feel woe. Saunders was loved and Gingell deified. None sure were happy if the players were not. In 1825, the fair was still going strong. One booth offered for a penny the spectacle of the black wild Indian woman, the white Indian youth, and the Welsh dwarf, and in addition the juggling of the young American. His turn was one of the best things to be seen at the fair. And in a survey of popular entertainments through the ages, it is of very special interest. The dress of the juggler closely resembled that of the Anglo-Saxon gleeman who appeared on an earlier page. He juggled with 5 balls and the 3 knives which he kept in the air, were very much like those of the gleeman. On the outside of a booth was inscribed, "To be seen alive, the prodigies of nature, the wild Indian woman and child with her nurse from her own country, the silver-haired lady and dwarf, only a penny." The showmaster made a speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, before I show you the wonderful prodigies of nature, let me introduce you to the wonderful works of art." And then he drew a curtain and revealed some waxwork figures. "This, ladies and gentlemen," he said, "is the famous old Mother Shipton, and here is the unfortunate Jane Shore, the beautiful mistress of King Edward II. Next to her is His Majesty King George IV of most glorious memory, and this is Queen Elizabeth in all her glory. Then here you have the Princess Amelia, the daughter of His late Majesty, who is dead. This is Mary, Queen of Scots, who had her head cut off. And this is O'Brien, the famous Irish giant. This man here is Thornton, who was tried for the murder of Mary Ashford. And this is the exact resemblance of Othello, the Moor of Venice, who was a jealous husband, and depend upon, and every man who is jealous of his life will be as black as that Negro. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the two next are a wonderful couple, John and Margaret Scott, natives of Dunkeld in Scotland. They lived about 90 years ago. John Scott was 105 years old when he died, and Margaret lived to be 112. And what is more remarkable, there is not a soul living can say he ever heard them quarrel. Here he closed the curtain, and while undrawing another, continued, "Having shown you the dead, I have now to exhibit to you two of the most extraordinary wonders of the living. This is the widow of a New Zealand chief, and this is the little old woman of Baghdad. She is 30 inches high, 22 years of age, and a native of Boston in Lincolnshire." Richardson's Theater was a large booth in which standing room only, announced or not, was the general state of affairs, and it had room for more than 1,000 spectators. Let's take a look at Bartholomew Fair in the late 18th century after a print by Rowlandson. What's this? Actors taking refreshments at Bartholomew Fair in the early 19th century. And then we have these. At Greenwich Fair, "And Melancholy Marked Him for Her Own" by John Leech. Poor little guy. Don't cry, buddy. Bartholomew Fair, about 1728. Lee and Harper is here. Judith and Holofernes. All right, back to the story. Outside was a particularly elevated platform, lined at the back with green baize, festooned with crimson curtains and decorated with 1,500 lamps of various colors. A band of 10 performers in scarlet uniforms, similar to those worn by beefeaters, attracted the crowds, and players in their gaudiest dresses paraded the platform. The scene on the platform was described by Dickens, and although the reference is to Greenwich Fair, the entertainment on the outside of the theater, is that Greenwich or would it be Greenwich in England? Like that on the stage, was so unaltering in its general nature that what applied to... I'm going to look it up. Is it Greenwich? Come on. Pronounced. I just assumed it's Greenwich, but it could be Greenwich. Where the hell was I even at? No, there I am. In Greenwich, England, the name is pronounced Greenwich. It is Greenwich. So it's the same in both. The reference is to Greenwich Fair. The entertainment on the outside of the theater, like that on the stage, was so unaltering in its general nature that what applied to Greenwich Fair applied to Bartholomew Fair and to the many other places which were visited by the famous showman. The company are now promenading outside in all the dignity of wigs, spangles, red ochre, and whiting. See with what a ferocious air the gentleman who personates the Mexican chief paces up and down, and with what an eye of calm dignity the principal tragedian gazes on the crowd below, or converses confidentially with the harlequin. The four clowns who are engaged in a mock broadsword combat may be all very well for the low-minded holiday makers, but these are the people for the reflective portion of the community. They look so noble in those Roman dresses, with their yellow legs and arms, long black curly heads, bushy eyebrows, and scowl expressive of assassination and vengeance, and everything else that is good and solemn. Then the ladies, were there ever such innocent and awful looking beings, as they walk up and down the platforms in twos and threes with their arms round each other's waist or leaning for support on one of those majestic men. Their spangled muslin dresses and blue satin shoes and sandals, a little the worse for wear, are the admiration of all beholders, and the playful manner in which they check the advances of the clown is perfectly enchanting. Just a going to begin. Pray come forward, exclaims the man in the countryman's dress, for the 70th time, and people force their way up the steps in crowds. The band suddenly strikes up. The Harlequin and Columbine set the example. Reels are formed in less than no time. The Roman heroes place their arms akimbo and dance with considerable agility, and the leading tragic act and the leading tragic actress and the gentleman who enacts the swell in the pantomime foot it to perfection. All in to begin, shouts the manager, when no more people can be induced to come forward. And away rush the leading members of the company to do the dreadful in the first piece. This was a bill of the play at Bartholomew Fair in 1825. Change of performance each day. Richardson's Theater. This day will be performed an entire new melodrama called The Wandering Outlaw, or The Hour of Retribution. Gustavus, Elector of Saxony. Mr. Wright, Orsina, Baron of Holstein. Mr. Cooper, Ulrich, and Albert, vassals to Orsina. Messengers, Grove and Moore. St. Clair, the Wandering Outlaw. Mr. Smith, Rinaldo, the Accusing Spirit. Mr. Darling, monks, vassals, hunters, etc. Rosabella, wife to the outlaw. Mrs. Smith, nuns and ladies. The piece concludes with the death of Orsina and the appearance of the Accusing Spirit. The entertainments to conclude with a new comic harlequinade, with new scenery, tricks, dresses, and decorations, called Harlequin Faustus, or the Devil Will Have His Own. Luciferno, Mr. Thomas, Damon, Amazor, afterwards Pantaloon, Mr. Wilkinson, Damon Zeochus, afterwards Clown, Mr. Hayward, Violoncello, Player, Mr. Hartum, Baker, Mr. Thompson, Landlord, Mr. Wilkins, Fisherman, Mr. Ray, Dr. Faustus, afterwards Harlequin, Mr. Salter, Adelaida, afterwards Columbine, Miss Wilmot, attendant demons, sprites, fairies, ballad singers, flower girls, etc., etc. The pantomime will finish with a splendid panorama painted by the first artists. Boxes 25, pit 15, gallery 6D. Dickens says that at Greenwich Fair, Richardson presented a melodrama with 3 murders and a ghost, a pantomime, a comic song, an overture, and some incidental music, all done in 5 and 20 minutes, and undoubtedly this was the time occupied by the similar show at Bartholomew Fair. In spite of Hone's jibe at the intelligent and brilliant audience, and Morley's reference to the most uncultivated playgoers, the melodramas and pantomimes presented by the famous showman to audiences all over the country gave many a good actor his training and brought pleasure to numbers of people who were by no means unintelligent. The stage career of James Barnes, the famous Pantaloon, began in Richardson's Theater at Bartholomew Fair, and he wrote, "I am not ashamed to own it. Many others who have prospered much more than I have began there. Mind, they did not tumble head over heels as I did. One of these was Edmund Kean, who played in pantomimes and melodramas. In addition to this, while he was touring with Richardson, he gave Shakespearean recitals to the class of people for whom the lines were written. George III heard of people for whom the lines. Oh, George III heard of his versatility and general outstanding merits. The result was that the Booth player gave a successful Royal Command performance at Windsor Castle. The receipts made by Richardson and other Bartholomew Fair showmen in 1828 are very interesting. If the reader cares to do a little arithmetic, he can ascertain how many visitors attended some of the exhibitions or performances during each of the 3 days. Wombwell's, or is it Wombwell's? Wombwell's Menagerie headed the list with 1,700 pounds. Then came Richardson's Theater, which drew 1,200 pounds. And after that, Atkins's Menagerie with 1,000 pounds, each of them charging 6 pence for admission. Morgan's Menagerie, how do you say that? Is it Menagerie or Menagerie? Pronunciation. Menagerie, yeah. Morgan's Menagerie charged 3 pence and drew 150 pounds. Shows of which the price of admission was from 2 pence to a halfpenny drew as follows: the pig-faced lady, 150 pounds, the fat boy and girl, 140 pounds, and the Chinese jugglers, 50 pounds. The proximity of Smithfield Market to Bartholomew Fair was responsible for the bowl which appears in the drawing by Cruikshank that is reproduced elsewhere. The cry "Mad Bowl" was a favorite one, with urchins who were bent on mischief. From about the beginning of the century, there were many advocates for the removal of the cattle market, not of course in order that the pleasure seekers at the fair might remain undisturbed, but the market, unlike the diminishing fair, had become too large. In the middle of the century it was removed, but by that time the reasons which Thomas Hood had given to a humorous poem were no longer valid. For the fair was dead. Part of his ode to the advocates for the removal of Smithfield Market is as follows. And first we'll look at this. Madame Theresia, the Corsican fairy, exhibited at Bartholomew Fair. Maximilian Christopher Miller, the German giant, exhibited at South Wark Fair. What else do we got? The Booth of Fawkes, the conjurer, at Bartholomew Fair, about 1728. Is that a dude or is that a woman? Fawkes looks like a woman. An incident from Ben Jonson's Bartholomew Fair. A forerunner of the cinema, Bartholomew Fair, 1728. Oh, think when Wombwell gives his annual feast, think of these bulls of Bassan, far from mild ones, such fierce tame beasts, that nobody much cares to see the wild ones. Think of the showwoman. What shows a dwarf, seeing a red cow come to swallow her Tom Thumb, and forced with broom of birch to keep her off. Think, too, of Messrs. Richardson and Co., when looking at their public-private boxes to see on a back row 3 live sheep's heads, a porker's, and an ox's. Think of their orchestra when 2 horns come through to accompany the double drum, or in the midst of murder and remorses, just when the ghost is certain, a great rent in the curtain, and enter 2 tall skeletons of horses. Great philanthropics, pray urge these topics upon the solemn council of the nation. Get a bill soon and give some noon. The bowl's a bowl of excommunication. Let the old fair have fair play, as its right, and to each show and sight ye shall be treated with a free list latitude to Richardson's stage dramas. Dio and Cosmo, Ramus, giants and Indians, wild, dwarf, sea bear, and fat child, and that most rare of shows, a show of gratitude. A poem of 1834 describes the change which had taken place. Where are ye fled, dear wandering wonders? Are ye old or dead? Have learned pigs the way of all pork gone? Are thieves of that day now at Sydney justling? Yea, Chuney too, the elephant hath flown, and left the world for greater beasts to bustle in. Prince of Morocco, I admired of yore, are ye in truth no more? Jesters have set to grave, wild men turned lame, mimes mute, and infant prodigies grown old. Scene of past freaks, you are not what you were, though still the fair is foul and foul is fair. The gongs and roundabouts and ups and downs, and the wild gleeful laugh of Jingel's clowns have flown. Old Richardson remains alone. The public was ceasing to attend the fair. The authorities were taking an interest in it only to suppress disorders, gambling, thieving, and undesirable forms of entertainment, to impose restrictive regulations, and greatly to increase the ground rents. Nevertheless, until 1840, the Lord Mayor declared it open in state. After that year, he performed the ceremony without any ostentation. In 1851, he ceased to dignify with his presence a fair which had almost disappeared, and a lesser luminary read from a scroll the words that declared it open. 4 years later, Bartholomew Fair was proclaimed for the last time. A 17th century mountebank of the English fairs. And that's it for chapter 2. And no one cares. Oh well.